puts IT in its place again as the central nervous system, going back to the earlier theme of the presentation. So I think this is a really important trend that we are seeing. More and more IT leaders recognizing this opportunity and ultimately this responsibility they have for the rest of the organization on these kinds of ideas. So this is what I mean by developing more of an R&D type mentality. If there isn't already an explicit R&D part of your organization or part of your own makeup, striving to do so, I think this is a really important part. I think what's also really interesting is, again, as you think about these and the broad business implications that these ideas have, let's take consumerization of IT, for example. I often say that consumerization of IT, I think that a lot of IT leaders see the demand for bring your own device and for introducing tablets and so forth is akin to Russell Crowe's character in Gladiator when he says, "Oh my, come on, unleash hell." It's kind of like, oh my gosh, now we are really going to have some difficult things to manage as a result of introducing these kind of new practices. But really, I think it's a tremendous opportunity. All of a sudden you have executives in your organization who, because by virtue of having smartphones and tablets and doing more and more with these computing devices, there's a recognition all of a sudden for, wow, there's a lot of value here. I'm banking and buying things and checking on all sorts of information using these devices. Gosh, what are the implications for my company? All of a sudden, people who may not have thought of this have reason to on a more regular basis. Again, it's an invitation, I would suggest, for the IT team to talk more about the potential implications of some of these changes. So I think that's a really important thing to focus on as well. So continuing with that theme, I just offer a graphic for this. By sharing these kinds of conversations, you will increasingly put IT in the center of all the kind of business implications and ultimately be an interpreter for the rest of the organization of what value might be created for multiple parts of the organization based on these kinds of ideas. I don't mean to suggest, by the way, that IT should be the sort of sun of the solar system for the rest of the company. I realize that would be controversial to take that back to your office. But in fact, I showed this to somebody. He said, "Is that what you're trying to suggest?" I said, "No. He said, frankly, I don't think this is the graphic. I think you ought to make IT the grease between two gears that are grinding against each other." I thought, oh my gosh, what a jarring image that would be. I don't know how to replicate that, but anyway. I hope that the point is made that IT has the opportunity of putting itself in the center of a lot of great conversations as a result of this, and really kind of putting on display the kind of value that IT can deliver. Getting into the fourth area, building skills in your team so that IT speaks the language of business. Excuse me one second. I have a few quotes here from 3 different CIOs from 3 companies you know. And I'll leave these, again, forgive me, people in the back, don't need to test your eyes with these. But the ultimate conclusion that the former CIO now, CIO Hall of Famer Carl Wilson, the current CIO of Cisco, Rebecca Jacoby, and the global CIO, actually former, just recently retired, the global CIO of CSC, David McHugh, the point that each of them made, I had reason to speak with David and with Carl, and the quote from Cisco comes from a Forbes interview with Rebecca Jacoby. When asked what were the differentiators for you, how did you become successful? How did you awaken in the rest of the organization your own potential skills? Actually, what was very interesting is all of them put near the top an understanding of finance, an ability to communicate in financial terms what IT is doing. And that's not just cost. It's a very, very important starting point, of course. Here's what we're going to spend. Here are the ways in which it's going to be spent. Proving at the end that you've done so effectively, that you've managed to been ultimately a solid custodian of those limited funds. But increasingly talking about the value that you're extracting. So the positive side, the ROI side of the equation. I think all too often, unfortunately, IT doesn't engage itself, and oftentimes it isn't asked to be fair about that point. But increasing the acumen of your organization on finance, I think it means you will get to the table with the same kind of background, the same kind of knowledge that the rest of the organization has, and benefit tremendously from having done so. So I think a really important theme that we're seeing across a variety of conversations that we've been having of late as to what are some of the differentiators, in this case for 3 very tech-centric. I include Marriott as they're one of the top 10, in terms of revenue, one of the top 10 businesses online. So 3 very much IT-centric organizations, and how the IT leaders ultimately in each case became real strategic leaders on behalf of the rest of the organization. on to the fifth idea. There's only one customer, the external customer. I think too often the IT leader refers to the rest of the organization as their customers. And again, I think this has sort of a master-slave or a servant kind of representation as a result of the implications of that I find inappropriate. I realize that this is a term that has been used for a long time. It may be controversial to say stop using it tomorrow. Some of you maybe can't for whatever reason. But there's a 12-step program probably that would help you with that. But I think that the idea here is recognizing that if in fact the rest of the organization is your customer, that it's putting you that much further away from the end customer. I'm amazed how often we visit IT departments, and you don't have to go that far below the CIO to find people that really don't understand how value is created within the company. How do we earn our revenues? How do we create value as a company? How do we delight customers? Without a knowledge of these kinds of things, it's very difficult. You don't have the full deck in place to be able to come up with the new ideas, the new sources of innovation, sources of value ultimately. And so finding ways to get your team exposure to the customer, whoever the customer is very important. I was speaking with Mike Capone of ADP 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about how he puts all of his IT people, they spend 20% of their time with external customers, whether it's listening to calls or even taking calls with customers and finding out what their problems are, going out into the field, speaking with customers who are using their payroll services solutions and so on. And as that's been an organization the past several years that has really tremendously innovated on behalf of the organization, a lot of the insights that they are drawing are from those very conversations, from that very exposure. And oftentimes the ideas are not coming from Mike or his cadre of leaders, but from people deeper in the organization because of the exposure they're getting. So not exposing your team down to the most junior levels to the ultimate customer, the end customer, really means that you're missing some things. So it's those people that are struggling to get into that Apple store. Those are the people you ought to be thinking about. It's not the Apple employees, to continue that analogy. Anyone know what city that is?
London.
Good guess? No? It's international?
UK.
It's Hong Kong. They apparently had like a near riot the day that they opened the Apple store. I think it was about a year and a half ago in Hong Kong. So anyway, you can see all the streaming with customers. Those are the people you really need to focus on and focus the attention of your team on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is another, I think, really interesting thing. For those that can see, this is kind of like the typical IT office. You go company by company, industry by industry, geography by geography, and IT offices 80% of the time look exactly the same. And it's a little bit like this. It's a sea of cubicles, and it's walls that are largely blank. So you can trade the healthcare company with the media company, put them back and forth, and there will be only subtle differences between those. And I think that's very unfortunate. Maybe that sometimes you'll have like the motivational poster up on the wall. Yes, now I know what I need to be doing. Thank goodness, motivation. Now I know what that word means. And I think that, again, that's very unfortunate. By the way, this comes from this is one of those posters from despair.com. The tagline is, if a pretty poster and a cute saying are all it takes to motivate you, you probably have a very easy job, the kind robots will be doing soon. And so I think it's important not to adorn your office with these beautiful pictures, admittedly, and these trite sayings, but to have it be a reflection of the business that you're in. The left is a Google office, the right is Pixar. Admittedly, very creative places. And when you walk around either of their offices, even in the IT department, but certainly the entire company, but even the IT department, very, very importantly, you see representations of what they do. So that when a person is taking a leisurely stroll to the cafeteria, to the restroom, to visit another colleague, they're constantly interacting with what it is that the company does. They're thinking about, yes, we developed that. I helped develop that. My friend helped develop that. Gosh, what are the implications? How do we take that platform of a product that we developed and develop some really interesting add-ons to it? I think that's really an important thing that a lot of IT departments don't get right. You go to marketing departments of those same companies, and oftentimes because of what they do, you go to a retailer's marketing department, you'll see all sorts of things that company sells. Again, all the more better for them, because the marketing people want to think about how do we get that product into some person's house. Why shouldn't IT be thinking in the same way? And how hard is that? Not hard at all. So I would certainly advise you to begin to think a little bit more in those terms. Find ways to have people accidentally think about new new ideas because they are constantly interacting with, also getting out into the field, whatever the field happens to be in your business. So I think a really important part of that as well. I wanted to close, before taking questions, close with some parting thoughts on how to be more innovative, and it kind of recaps a few things that we've talked about. First of all, make innovation a priority. This is one of those things that's easy to say, but very difficult to deliver. So make it clear. Call everyone into a room like this and say, you know what, we've not been a source of innovation in the past, that's going to change. And here are the ways in which you're going to do so, and here's the pilot program we have to begin to start to seed some of these ideas and draw them from our colleagues. Make it a priority, and then be steadfast in that declaration. I think that's the first important starting point. Take risks and embrace failure. That failure part's a really interesting one. About a month ago, I was speaking with Norm Feldheim, who's the